And say, welcome everyone. So I am Rebecca Graves, and I'm the Education Services Librarian at the Health Sciences Library. So on the days that I'm on campus, I'm down at the hospital end of campus. And then I'm going to let Janice, my colleague, introduce herself.
I'm Janice Dysart. I'm the science librarian that's based in Ellis Library, though I'm not there too much, but I can be if needed to be. I can come in, but right now I'm mainly working from home.
Right. Yeah. So the take home on that is we are here to help you. And if you want to meet with us, feel free to set up a time and we can make it work out, whether it's on Zoom or masked on campus. And so today we are going to be talking about maximizing your research identity and impact. And Joe, our colleague, put up the guide or the handout link in the chat. And you also should have gotten it by email, and that has the URLs for the guide we'll be talking about and also these different websites, since there's a bunch of different tools. And so to start with actually, I'm going to start with a question and say, how many of you have an ORCID or ORC ID number? You can put in the chat, yes, or you can, like, okay, I see a thumbs up and I see one yes, I do. I see a nope. Okay. So for the folks who don't know about it, this was created about 7 years ago already. Because as we all know, we run into confusion over names. So there's like people have similar or the same name. I actually ran into somebody who had the same name as another researcher in the same field. So people change their names for a variety of reasons. There's different cultural and social conventions on name and name order. So is the family name first or last? And if people have multiple names, which of the names are the family names? And then people move institutions and even change their research focus. So the solution that was proposed and adopted for that was the Open Researcher Contributor ID, which is ORCID, or I say ORCID. So that way I spell it without the H because it doesn't have the H. And so for those of you who don't have one, we recommend that you actually do get one because it's becoming required. And I am going to start sharing my screen. So this is the guide I mentioned that Janice created for this workshop. And the link you should see it here on your screen. And also it's on that handout. And on the left are the researcher profiles. So the identity part of maximizing your research identity. And so here's information about the ORCID or ORCID. And then I'm going to go to their website. And you can use this to gather your information all under one name. It is automatically updated as long as you do a couple of things. You need to submit your ORCID ID. All right, assuming you have an ORCID ID number, then you need to submit it when you submit publications or for grants, etc. So you have to have your number out there. And then you also have to allow two companies or institutes, Crossref and DataCite, to update your ORC ID records. So you can do that when you set up your profile, or you could go back in and change your profile. I'm going to pull up one of our faculty members.
Rebecca, we've got a question.
Oh, sure.
Robert.
Hey, Rebecca, this is Rob Patrone.
Oh, hi, Rob. How are you?
Hey, good. I'm doing great. A couple quick questions about the ORCID or ORCID. So I work with practitioners who are not faculty members. They don't work at Mizzou. Can they establish ORCID numbers as well?
Yes.
Okay. You don't have to be university affiliated or anything?
No. Well, that's a good question.
You shouldn't have to be.
I don't think, because I know, like, I'm going to talk about the Google Scholar profile, and they want an institutional email in your account. But I don't think ORCID does.
Okay.
I think an independent researcher could claim a number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
But I will double check that after this. So I typed in a name, And so this is Joanna Chase out of the School of Nursing. And so you'll see that it has the name, it has the number. You see that there's another ID number, a Scopus ID number, and Janice will be talking about that. And the employment, education, and then works. And you can have additional fields in here. So you can set it up as you wish. And you see that it says sources cross-ref. So you can manually enter, but the idea is that you can have this automated as much as possible. And so you can use this to find collaborators or hope that future collaborators can find you this way. And also if you have a lab with graduate students or you mentor graduate students or a dissertation advisor, you can have your students get an ORCID number, and then this way you can follow their career. So wherever they go, and you can, because your impact on them is part of your impact in the scholarly field. So another use for ORCID numbers. So since we have a lot to cover, I'm not going to go any deeper in that, but if you do have questions, feel free to reach out and I will double check about who can have an ORCID number. And I'll go back to the profiles page. So again, on this guide, you can see ORCID profile and get some information there. So we recommend that you start there and you sign up for that number if you haven't already, and that you encourage your graduate students and your colleagues to do that. And now I'm going to stop my share so that Janice can
Take over. Okay.
take over and talk about Scopus.
Okay, let's go here. Oh, sorry, I clicked the wrong share button. Okay, Rebecca was talking about ORCID, which is an ID that you set up yourself. And I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about one that is automatically set up for you once you've published a few articles. And that's the author profile that is in Scopus. And if you're not familiar with Scopus, Scopus is a large database that MU subscribes to. It's one of our most heavily used electronic resources that the library offers. And it's a big index, primarily to journal articles. It also indexes some other things, but primarily journals. It indexes about 35,000 journals in all different disciplines, though I have to say it's strongest in the sciences and the social sciences. There were a few people that registered for the workshop today that are in English. I don't know if they came online or not today, but English is not one of, Scopus does index some English journals, but it's certainly not comprehensive. But we're going to go into Scopus and I'll show you an example. And we're going to do, once we get in there, we'll do an author search to pull up a profile. We'll stick with Joanna, I think it's 2 words, Joanna Chase. And you can see on here that she has published under at least 2 variations of her name, with and without the initial. And Scopus has indexed 29 articles that she's published. Scopus does have criteria for journals to meet before Scopus will index them. So they don't index all journals, but they index quite a few at 35,000. So to look at her profile that Scopus has created, you just click on her name. And you can see it lists her ORCID, and this number here is the Scopus author profile number. And Scopus gives each of these author profiles a permanent URL, which is up here. And you can use this number to access authors' profiles. If you're currently at an institution that does not subscribe to Scopus, you can still access this information, but you'll only see information on the first 10 articles that the researcher has written. You won't see details about the other articles that they've written, but you will see this kind of information, this summary information. So you can see the little chart of what she's written through time and how it's been cited. And then there's a list of articles down below. Now we suggest once you start writing and publishing articles, it's worth checking your Scopus profile once a year just to see what it looks like. And you can, if you just Google Scopus author profile, you can connect to, you can search on a name and connect to a profile, even if you're not, as I said, your institution doesn't subscribe to Scopus. So they will let you look at author profiles. And you really just want to see if Scopus gets everything right. And they've gotten better and better through the years of matching the correct articles with the correct person. But they occasionally make mistakes. Certainly if you have an ORCID, that helps Scopus out tremendously, especially if you have a real common name. But you just want to look at your profile and look at the articles that they've assigned to you. And if you see some kind of mistake, either in the institutional affiliation or the author or the articles listed, you can click on this edit profile link and it will take you step by step through a wizard. There's a little wizard that you can use to make corrections. So just keep that in mind. And they have been known to add articles. If some articles are missing from your profile, it first has to be something that they cover, a journal that they index. But if they do, you can, in that case, you have to contact their help desk. And basically the help desk is going to ask you to send a copy of the article to them. And then my experience has been, they've been very good about adding the article to Scopus. So that is the author profile in Scopus. Any questions on that before I move on?
I was just going to ask real quick, if you have publications that's not in one of those 30,000 that can you enter them manually or no?
No. You can submit a request for Scopus to cover a journal, and they will examine the journal to see if it meets their criteria. That's all you can do. Scopus only indexes, you can do the same thing with books too, but Scopus only indexes a very small subset of books. They tend to index books that are edited, and each chapter is written by an individual author. Mm-hmm. They don't tend to, I don't think they really index any books that were written entirely by one person. So this isn't the best place to go for things like that. So all you can do is ask, basically, and see what they say. Now, one thing they list on the author profile is this H index over here, which for Dr. Chase is 11. Has anybody heard of the H index? Just kind of raise your hand. I just want to see anybody familiar with that. It's a fairly new metric. It came out about 15 years ago. A physics professor in Spain named Jorge Hirsch decided he wanted to come up with a metric that indicated both a researcher's impact and their productivity. And he devised what he decided to call the H index. Could have been called the Hirsch index, but he called it the H index. And what this number is telling you right here is that Dr. Chase so far has written 11 articles that have been cited 11 or more times. Now you can obviously see she's written more than 11 articles, 29 at the moment, according to Scopus. But so far, 11 of them have been cited 11 or more times. And you can actually go through, you can kind of look down through her articles here and start counting down. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if you look over on the right, you can see how many times they've been cited. And let's go to page 2. And you can see, whoops. Oh, I forgot to do something. That didn't work. What I have to do first, the articles are in chronological order. I forgot. And so you have to sort them. You want to sort them by most cited first. So we're going to do cited by highest. Okay, this will make more sense. So her most cited article has been cited 90 times. And if you count down, I think there are 10 articles per page here. So the number 10 article has been cited 14 times. And then we'll go to page 2. We can see the number 11 article has been cited 14 times. And the number 12 article has only been cited 11 times. So that's why her H index right now is 11. But if this article gets cited one more time, or this article here gets cited one more time, or this article here gets cited 5 more times, her H index will move up to 12. So your H index should increase over time. But you go, well, is 11 good? And you don't really know because it's all relative. Certainly the higher your H index, the better. But it all depends on what field you're researching in, how often people cite material in that field, and how long you've been in the field. You really have to compare yourself to other people who have been in, who are in a similar field of research as you, and who have been in that field for about the same amount of time. Because certainly when you're starting out researching, you're only going to have 1 or 2 articles to your name. And your H index can never be higher than the number of articles you have. So you could have written a couple articles that have been cited, hundreds of times, but your H index is only going to be 2 until you write more articles. So basically it's relative, and it seems to be gaining traction as far as a metric that administrators want to look at. I know some of the university administrators now like to see reports of researchers on campus and what their H indexes are and how high their H indexes are. And so it's gaining traction. So you're going to start seeing people talk about the H index. So it's something basically to be aware of. It's not something you can control other than, writing more articles, which would help increase it. And then of course, writing articles that people cite. So any questions about the H index? Okay, let's do one more thing. I'm going to resort my articles back to newest first, and I want to talk about one other fairly new new set of metrics that are coming out that I want to make sure everybody's aware of. I'm not sure it's site. Oops, I think I'm on page 2. I'm going to go back to page 1 of the results. Okay, let's look at her article from 2020 that's been cited 5 times. I'm just clicking on the title to get to the full display. And over here on the right, scan too far. Whoops, you'll see a very colorful graphic here that says Plum X metrics. And what PlumX is a company that is collecting what are called alt metrics for articles. Alt metrics is short for alternative metrics. And through the years, up until a few years ago, really the only metric you could get for an article that kind of indicated the quality of the article is the number of times the article's been cited after it's been published. That was really the only metric. But since that time, a lot of social platforms have come out, you know, the web has come along, the internet. And so somebody, I don't know who, but people came up with the idea of, well, let's start looking at all the social mentions of articles. Let's start tracking that. And they decided to call that kind of metrics associated with that kind of usage as alt metrics. And PlumX is one company that does this. And if you click on this little colorful icon here, you can see a little more detail on the metrics of this particular article according to the company PlumX. And if you come down and look through here, you'll see this article has been downloaded into Mendeley 18 times. Mendeley is if you're not familiar with Mendeley, it's a citation manager like EndNote, Zotero. It happens to be owned by Elsevier, which owns Scopus, which owns PlumX. So that's why these are sort of all related. And that's why they're measuring that probably. And you can see they found news. They found a news article on this research article, and they found 2 tweets. And if you click on details, you can actually see the news article and read the tweets if you want to. You can see, let's look at the news article. It was mentioned in Medical Health News. Now, PlumX is just one company that does this. Another company that does this is called Altmetrics, or altmetric.com. And they, PlumX are in metrics or in Scopus, but let's go look at altmetric data. They publish their data in a database called Dimensions. And Dimensions is actually a freely available database that came out just a few years ago. It's actually a very nice database. It's similar to Scopus in a lot of ways. It does index a lot of journals. It also, as you can see, does grants and clinical trials, patents, does some policy things, data sets. So it does a lot of things. But today we're just going to look real briefly at their altmetric data that they have for articles. And I'm going to look up an article that was written by a University of Missouri researcher a few years ago, and it garnered all sorts of social attention. It was really kind of amazing how much attention it got. And whoops, let's try that. Let's see if I can pull it up. And it's a little small, but you'll see this little box that says altmetrics. And it's got a number next to it. I'm looking for this one that has this huge number. So the bigger the number, the more social attention the article's gotten. And we're going to look at this one. If I just run my cursor over the box, it gives me the highlights. I can see this article's been picked up on plants being aware of insects chewing on their leaves, which sounds pretty interesting, I have to say. It's been covered by 92 news outlets. It's been tweeted a lot. And just like PlumX, you can see the details. So you can actually get into the news articles and the blogs and the tweets. Just look at news articles. You can see this article, it was published, I think it was 2014, but it's still being mentioned in news articles. So it's kind of gotten legs, I should say, research with legs. So So the publishers, the journal publishers have sort of become aware of this and that people are starting to pay attention to this data. So journals are starting to post some of this metrics, altmetric data on their websites. And I'll show you just an example of that real quick. Let's go to, I'm just going to look up an article real quick. This was another article that got a lot of attention. And this was about how insects are really decreasing around the world. And it was published in a journal called PLOS ONE, which is a big open access journal. But notice, like a lot of journals now, you'll see a little tab on the site for the journal article that says metrics. And if you click on this site, this little tab in this case, or button that says metrics on the journal article page, one of the big metrics that the journal publishers are collecting is how often the article is being viewed, how often it's being downloaded. So you can see this one, it's been viewed over half a million times, but maybe more importantly, it's been downloaded not quite 100,000 times, because that indicates a little more interest. And depending on the publisher, they may link you to other usage. You can see they're using Mendeley too. 827 people have downloaded this article to Mendeley. And so basically, altmetrics, you go, well, what does this mean? It's still relatively new. I think, you know, in the future, people will be paying more and more attention to it. People who are like hiring you or promoting you, they're probably going to start paying more attention to this kind of data. For now, I think it's mainly of interest to the people who have written articles, because with the old metric, how often an article is cited, you have to wait months and months to see how often an article is cited. Whereas with altmetrics, you can almost instantly see the activity that's going on and with your research. Now, of course, it helps if you have research that's attractive to the general public. That's probably going to garner more interest than some of the more complicated research, which is just as good, but it just doesn't attract the general public. And they have been doing studies, I'll just indicate, on whether getting your research out into social media, like getting tweets about it or something like that, does that help your research get more attention, get cited more? And preliminary research is indicating that that seems to be the case. They haven't done a definitive research study yet that says, yes, that's definitely the case, but it seems to be helping articles get cited more if they're tweeted a lot and get out there in the social platforms. So any questions about altmetrics? If not, I'll turn it back over to Rebecca to talk about Google Scholar profiles.
All right. So I am going to grab the screen share back. And so we've talked about the ORCID profile, which is optional, although becoming required, and highly recommended, and talked about the Scopus profile. Now I'm going to mention the Google Scholar profile, and I'm guessing some of you have one already. I'm curious if you would say who has one, who doesn't have one. Anybody? All right, I see one thumbs up. All right, I'm not seeing others. So this one is also totally optional. All right, so I see another thumbs up too. So in Google Scholar, you can go in and you can click on my profile to create one. And you can also use it to search on people. And again, it's built on that idea of making you and your research discoverable. So it's easier for people to find you, whether they want to collaborate with you because they're in that field or they want to use your research. And since Google's so ubiquitous at present, um, actually, I didn't want to create my account, but you could come in here and you could log in with yours, or you could click create an account and it'll walk you through it. And you can have it set up to automatically pull in citations, or you can have it set up to where you have to okay them. And I'm actually going to go back out of here and I'm going to search on Joanna Chase again. I'm not doing well with my keyboard here. So if you search on somebody's name and they have a profile, it should come up at the top of the list of documents, and then you can select it. And they do allow for photos, and it's recommended you do that since we're such visual creatures. It helps people, capture attention. And unlike ORCID, it's pretty much just going to be your publications. So the publications you have on here. And again, you can have Google pull them in based upon your name and then find them and put them up here, and you can always correct it, clean it up later. And you can also put them in manually. So you have that option. And on the right-hand side, you see a chart. And like the Scopus author ID or author profile, it also shows how many citations you have and your H index. And they also have another one called the I-10 index. And you notice the numbers aren't the same because Scopus and Google Scholar don't index exactly the same population of journals. We know what Scopus indexes because you can look under their source list and see what journal titles they index completely and selectively. And you can also go in and search by a specific journal title. Google Scholar is based on Google, and we know that they work with quite a few publishers and associations for their publications, and they've gone through and scanned quite a few library collections, but they don't have a master list that they have publicly available. So it's a little more work to try to, do they cover this particular journal? And if you have an article that is not included in Google Scholar, since that question came up, you can actually have it included in Google Scholar. So you could, there's a couple of ways to go around that. I'm not going to go through them, but if you look up their directions in creating a Google Scholar profile, they have a section on how to get your documents into Google Scholar in general. So, and then that way it'll be tagged and put in your profile as well. So you notice that we had an H index of 11 for Dr. Chase in Scopus, but here Google Scholar has it as 14. So again, 14 is better than 11, but as Janice said, you're going to have to look at what's the discipline and then what's the, research age. I mean, not the researcher's specific age, but their age as a researcher and professional, to see if that's good. And if you're citing these, you also need to say, I got this H index from Scopus, or I got this H index from Google Scholar, just to make it clean and clear where you got it from. The I-10 is the number of publications that have 10 or more citations in the last 5 years. So as Janice mentioned, it used to be how many articles or book chapters you've published. Then it became, well, how many times they've been cited. Now it's what's your H index, and then it's also what's your I-10 index. So there's multiple ways that you can try to track impact, and each one's trying to correct for some other piece. So again, you'll have to check with your department and your discipline and ultimately the university, whether it's MU or another university, which of these count. And you might find ones that are meaningful for you as far as how you judge your performance. And so even if it's not counted in your promotion and tenure packet, you might track it yourself. So I'm looking at my notes to see if there's anything else in here.
Is there a way to see what the average H index or I-10 index would be for a given field?
No.
I was thinking, like, I don't know of one, and Janice, thanks for jumping in because I was going to ask you.
No, I mean, basically you have to figure that out yourself. You'd have to look up, usually you would know researchers in your field, and you might have to look at like Scopus to see how long they've been publishing in the field, to see, you know, how far back their articles go. But basically you would have to figure that out yourself. There's no, so far, I won't say that won't ever happen, but so far, no entity like Scopus has come up with any average H index for time in field in the different disciplines.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking through some of these, and I know some of these researchers that Dr. Chase has co-authored with. Some of them are senior researchers, so like I know if I put Vicky Kahn in here, she's going to be way higher. So it kind of ties in with those external review letters. So you'd need to have a list of, well, who are the people in my field, both here in my institution, maybe people you meet at conferences, you know, other people whose work you follow, people you went through your PhD program with, you know, like, and have some people that you track, and then you can track, like, you can put their names into Google Scholar and see if they have a profile. You could put their name into like ORCID and see what their number is, and then find them in Scopus and look them up. So yes, sadly, there's not a quick and easy way to do it. But you could, if you had a couple of people that you were following, you could make an author search or, you know, search on them in Scopus, and every so often run that search and say, hey, what do these author profiles look like? Am I ahead of the pack? Am I in the middle of the pack? Am I falling behind the pack of my research cohort? Any other questions on Google Scholar? Okay. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Janice. Setting up your profile is fairly straightforward. Google does a good job of walking you through it, and we have a bunch more to cover. So I'm going to stop my screen share and turn it over for one more ID.
I'm not sure I'm really doing one more ID, but I wanted to just mention there are, if I'm looking, I'm going back to the guide I created, and you'll notice I'm sort of keeping track of the author profiles I come across that look like they're somewhat worthwhile, that have some validity to them. And so you'll notice there's a big long list over here, and you certainly don't want author profiles on all of these, but you may want to go through faculty scholars. It's a one at the University of Missouri. If you're a faculty member or a researcher here, they're going to put you in this database, and it's a way to publicize the research that's going on at the university and to try to get more researchers to work together. Like, researchers could come in from other institutions and look at this and try to find somebody they might be able to do research with. Academia.edu, that is, despite its name, it is a commercial site. It's used, it's kind of a social networking site that's used by humanities researchers. Since this one came out, there's one called Humanities Commons, which is also being used by humanities people, and it is a nonprofit site. So I think this one is gaining in popularity over Academia, I can't even say it, .edu. And the other one that the other social networking site, research site that you hear a lot about is ResearchGate. And this is what a lot of science and social science people use. And it's one of those things where you might want to try it out. You would, you know, sign up for it and you'd set up a profile and then see what you think. I think from what I've heard, you do get a lot of emails if you join this. So it may be worth investigating, but it's certainly not mandatory that you do that. And then BioSketch would just be one that you would have if you do research that's funded by NIH. That would be one that you would get. So just keep these in mind. And I think now we're going to let Rebecca talk about repositories.
Yes. So, all right. So we were looking on the guide and we were under the researcher profiles. And down farther is research repositories. So it's good to have a couple of profiles set up for you or to know which ones to monitor. But then there's also, where do you put your finished work? How do you get it out there? Obviously, there's publishing in journals and books, but beyond that, there's also using repositories, which are the large secure storage spaces. MU libraries have one called MOspace. So if you want, you can store your work here, and it's available to faculty, staff, or students, and I have it linked up here or opened up here. So to get there, just mospace.umsystem.edu, and you can see up across the top, there's a search. There's also submit work. So there's a link for submitting works, and it's fairly straightforward. And then also help and contact information should you need that. One thing about submitting works is that you do have to have the rights to it. You do have to retain your ownership, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more in a little bit. I already did a search on here, and I pulled up this piece, the global journalists, photojournalists working through a pandemic. And I like this example because it shows the different files that are stored. PDFs are very traditional to be kept in a repository, but they don't have to be. So you can see they have MP3, they have WAV, they have photos that can be put in here. And you have a URL that is specific to this document. So you can tweet that out, you can email it, you can post it on a website, put it in a dossier, to say this is my work, to share it so that people can find it. Google crawls these repositories. So if people search Google, they should find this information. And then also down below, they have data, which I opened up ahead of time just because in these days of rolling blackouts, it can be a little slow. So you can track the data usage, like how many times this has been viewed and how many times it's been downloaded. So if I mouse over it, of these 126 usages, 87 were views and 39 were downloads. So you could say, oh, download, that's important because somebody actually wanted to keep a copy. And then they also divide it out by country, which is what we saw before with some of the other alt metrics. So this gives you a place to store your finished work, make it discoverable, has a static URL, and then you can collect some statistics on it as well. Now, if you have gotten funding for your research, you might have to put your research in a particular repository. So they might say, like NIH funding, you're supposed to put it in PubMed Central, for example. So that's something to keep in mind. So you might be prescribed where you need to store your data or your finished documents. If you don't have that constraint, and if you're like, well, maybe I'm going to go off and be independent, or I'm not sure where I'm going to end up, there are other repositories, and one of them is Figshare. And this is a freemium where you can get a free account. And then if you want to, you can pay more to get more features. And so it's a similar idea to MoSpace. So I'm not going to take any time to search on it, but you would get the same page. You'd get a static URL. They also have statistics, and they have some alt metrics that they cover in track for you. And again, I'm going to click back on the tab for the research guide. So if you're interested in these, you see MoSpace is linked on the left table of contents, and there's also Figshare. And then some more information. And I want to go to copyright and repositories, because again, as I mentioned, if you sign away your rights, then it's problematic how much you can share. So a tip here is, before you start looking to publish, and maybe even before you start writing, if you're working with other colleagues, is to stop and say, how many rights do you want to keep? Do you want to like sign away the final published copy, but you want to be able to keep the rights to use it in your classes, etc.? You know, what are you comfortable with? And have that decided ahead of time, because at the end of the process, especially if multiple people, and you're saying like, oh, we finally found a publisher, but they want to keep all rights for all time in all parts of the universe in any type of format ever since created or will be created forever, you know, and you're like, wow, that's pretty extreme. I've seen contracts pretty close to that. So it can be hard to negotiate it at that end, because you're all tired from writing it. You've got to get it all together and you're like, I just want it published. I need this. So think about these things ahead of time. Like, how much information do you need? And in your to keep. And then what ties in with that, there's a site called Sherpa Romeo, because you can come to this site, and we have it linked, where you can say, well, if I am going to publish on here, let's see, what rights do I usually retain? What rights do they typically keep or want to keep? So if I type in American sociology, like I said, I'm not having good luck with my keyboard today. So here's American Sociological Review. So this journal, and it gives the publication information, and then their policy on open access. And you can see that they have icons. And if you want to know what they mean, so if you're like, what rights would I have to the published version? You can click on that plus sign and it'll break it out, what those icons mean, and a definition, and what information you can keep. And you could always try to negotiate this, you know. You may, I mean, asking is not getting, as my boss says, but you don't get if you don't ask. So this at least gives you an idea of where you would have to negotiate. What are they going to give you? So, and then you could say the accepted version, the published version, etc. So something to keep in mind when you're looking to publish is, what rights are the publishers going to want to keep? What would you have to negotiate? What do you want to keep? And then where do you want to save it in a repository so that your work can get out and be accessible to other people? There's a sister database to Sherpa Romeo called Sherpa Juliet, that looks at funders. So like the National Institutes of Health and other grantors. So you can say, if I get money from this agency, where do they require me to share my data, and how? So some pieces to keep in mind. So again, back on the guide website. So I clicked on my tab to take us to the Maximizing Your Research and Identity, and we're under Research Repositories. So some places to check in there about where you can share your information and what rights you would automatically, they're going to start out the gate taking for, you might need to negotiate. So that is a brief overview on repositories and copyright. And now I'm going to turn it back to Janice.
Whoops, my Sorry, my share screen disappeared. Button disappeared. Okay. To wrap it up, I'm going to talk about one more thing, and that's journal rankings, because certainly if one way to increase the impact of your research is to publish it in what we call high impact journals. And there are several different methods for ranking journals that are out there. The one that's been around a long time that seems to, it just doesn't go away, is the journal impact factor, which is created by the company called Clarivates, which is the company that puts out the database Web of Science, which is a very similar database to Scopus as far as indexing a lot of scholarly academic journals in all different fields. And the impact factor for a journal is going to be a numerical value. And to find journal impact factors for a particular journal, you can use a research called journal citation reports. So I'm going to go into looking for a database, and we're just going to go into journal citation reports. And we'll just look up a journal. We'll look up a title. We're going to browse by, no, we're not going to actually browse. We're going to just search for a particular title. And I'll just do an education title. Well, this is a journal called Learning and Instruction. And you have to see if it pops up in this little box down here. If you type in a title and it doesn't, and no little box kind of shaded in blue pops up, that means there is no impact factor for that journal, because impact factors are only assigned for a subset of journals that are indexed by Web of Science. So not all journals have impact factors. And in fact, no humanities journals have impact factors, because impact factors are based on how often a journal is cited. They run the computations every year and they come up with numbers, and the number is basically telling you that if an article is published in that journal, that's the average number of times it will be cited. Now, certainly journals publish articles that are never cited, and then they publish articles that are cited much more than this number. So it's really just basically a guideline to how much that journal is cited. And in this case, the journal Learning and Instruction, its citation, or its journal impact factor for 2019 is 3.323. The impact factors for 2020 will be coming out this summer. They take a while to compute them. And you go, well, is 3.323, is that any good? And it's sort of like H-index, it's all relative. And so once you know the impact factor, what you want to do is scan down this page, and you get to, you see this little word here, rank. You want to see how this journal ranks in its discipline. So you hit rank. And in this case, this journal has been assigned to two different subject areas: education and educational research, and psychology educational. And in the education category, it's ranked number 24 out of 263 journals. It's in the first quartile. In psychology educational, it's ranked even higher, but there's a fewer number of journals. It's 860, and it's also in the first quartile. Now, you may want to look at the other journals in these two areas. So now you have to go back up to the top of the page and click on one of these subject areas. We'll just do education. And it will take you to a list of journals that have been ranked in this area. And you can see the top ranked journal has an impact factor of 8.327. And that makes it number one. Now, impact factors are like, probably like H indices are very dependent on the field. Like an 8 in education is very high. An 8 in a biomedical research field would not put it at the top of the list, because it's all based on how much people are citing each other in the field and how many researchers are in the field. And certainly in the biomedical fields, there are a lot of researchers, there's a lot of grant money, a lot of articles are being published. So there's a good chance of being cited quite a bit. And the journals, their articles are cited quite a bit. Where in fields where there's fewer numbers of journals, there's fewer numbers of articles and researchers, your impact factors or journal impact factors will be smaller. There are other journal rankings. Scopus has their own, they came out with their own journal ranking a few years ago called Site Score. It is very similar to journal impact factors, but you can't strictly compare them. Scopus does index more journals than Web of Science, or assigns journal rankings to more journals than Web of Science. So if you can't find an impact factor for a journal you're using, you may want to try Scopus Site Score, and you may get a site score for it. Usually journals on the journal page, they'll tout what their impact factor is, because just a journal getting an impact factor is considered prestigious. It's considered a plus, since not all journals get impact factors. So basically it's something to keep in mind. It is a way to, to look for journals in your area that you might want to publish in the future. You just go to Journal Citation Reports, and over here on the left-hand column, you can select categories, and you can go down through different subject areas. And let's do this one, because this one, you'll just see the difference in impact factors. And we're going to do biochemistry. And what I have to remember is I have to go down here and unselect education. And then I come down to the bottom here and click submit. And we'll now get the rankings for the, maybe it didn't take my check mark because nothing's there. Let's go back. Nope. Huh. Let's try one more time. Huh, I don't know what happened. Well, it should display. Oh, let's just try. Let's try clear. Yeah, let's just try ecology. It usually works very nicely. Oh, okay. I don't know why it didn't come up for the other one. Okay, here are the journals in ecology, and you can see the top ecology journal, Trends in Ecology and Evolution, has an impact factor of 38. So you can see it's a scientific field. It's just a lot higher than education. There are just more researchers and more articles being published in the field. But you can scan down through here and look at the different journals and see if there are ones that, match what your research would be, and, investigate, go to the journal website and just look into whether that would be a good match for your research. And I think we're definitely a little afternoon, so basically that's what we wanted to talk about today. Basically, we really encourage you to get an ORCID if you want to really be discoverable. We'd recommend a Google Scholar ID or profile, and then check Scopus profile once in a while. And otherwise, whatever researcher IDs and profiles you want to set up is really, your personal preference. And can keep repositories in mind for publishing non-journal research, like, presentations, posters, things like that.
And if and when you have questions, feel free to give us a shout. our Janice and my contact information is on the handout. And we also can be found on the library's website, in campus Outlook email. So always happy to help answer questions.
And thanks for coming.
There should be this was being recorded, so this session will be available eventually, and there's also a recording of a previous session that you could tap into as well. Well, everyone take care and enjoy the sunshine.